This episode is brought to you by Shapeshift.io, the easiest, fastest, and most secure way to swap your digital assets. Don't run the risk of leaving your funds on a centralized exchange. Visit Shapeshift.io to get started today. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Creating a Humanist Blockchain Future. And in this episode, this is actually pulled from a talk and a panel that I moderated at Denver Startup Week. And in this one, we chat with Raine Revere, who's the lead architect at Shapeshift Prism, and is also the co-founder of Maiden, a blockchain diversity startup. And so in the episode, we talk about diversity in blockchain. But before we dive into the episode, I just want to talk a little bit about diversity in blockchain because I think it can be a little bit of a controversial subject. And for me, I want to say kind of two high-level points on it. The first is about this loop between technology and society, where we both inform the technology that we make, and then the technology informs us. And there's this loop between us and technology. And this is one of the key kind of highest level system loops that you can think about. And when we think about this, it just becomes so clear that we really, really need to think about our values, because those values will be, reflected in the tech that's there. And you can hear this in the most recent podcast with Albert Wenger. Trent McConaughey gave a talk at 9984 Summit about the Ocean Protocol and the values that are within there. Sweetbridge gave this 9 blog post outline of their values. So really, this concept of values is just crucial. I think is a little bit not emphasized enough. And you can argue whether diversity should be in that value set, but as long as we're thinking about values and thinking about that tech society loop, I think that's key. And then the other part here that actually Raine gave me the words for at the end of this talk that you'll hear is really thinking about so this is a systems level podcast at a high level, but it also has these pledges to decentralized power. And one of those pledges is by having at least 33% women on my podcast. And the way to think about that Raine helped me with is thinking about the systems and thinking about the systems really as an object in what we're talking about, but then also thinking about the subject and thinking about who is talking about those systems, who is defining them. And that's just something to keep in mind as you go forward, where whenever you're evaluating a thing or looking at a thing, you can look at the thing itself, but you have to ask yourself, hey, who are the people that are defining it? Who are the experts? Who are we looking for to make decisions, to get advice from? And that's another crucial point. So with that, hope you enjoy the talk where Raine and I dive into diversity in blockchain. Enjoy. Revere, swinging miss. Okay, so Raine, could you, I guess, the way that I kind of think about this is we talk about decentralization as kind of a key underlying, almost like a value within this space. Saying things are too centralized right now, we want to decentralize all the things. And one of those things that people don't often bring up, I think, as part of this is like the decentralization of who has power. And specifically which kinds of genders and races and ethnicities are represented. And I think about this a lot as like a rich white male in America within the space. So I guess could you tell me first, before diving into how could you I guess start first with talking about decentralization and whether or not how do you think it kind of aligns with the kind of diversity and gender initiatives within the space?
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle that.
Switch microphones.
Yeah, let me switch. There we go. That's better. So that's a small question. I'll just tackle that right now. In just words, so I'm the lead architect of Shapeshift Prism, and I'm the co-founder of Maiden. And with Maiden, we are looking at the diversity within the blockchain space a lot more. And so I have a rich experience on the engineering side, and then due to my psychology background, I'm aware of the social issues that are all around us, social issues in tech, social issues in finance, and like if you look at even just taking like one group of women, like the number of women in tech is this much, and then the number of women in finance is this much, and then the number of women in fintech, blockchain is even smaller. And so that's a problem. It's something we should be talking about. In the blockchain space, right, the decentralized vision is one where there aren't these third-party intermediaries that are extracting too much value from the system, right? Peer-to-peer allows that value to be exchanged and held and benefit the users themselves. And I think too often we talk about the potential of this technology and sort of glorify this decentralized future, and yet you go to a blockchain meetup, and if you look out into the crowd at a blockchain meetup, like this is the future. Like is that really what we want if there's no women in this space? You know, we all have women in our lives. We all know people from different backgrounds, and so why isn't that diversity and the intelligence that's innate to that diversity? And why aren't we ensuring that our future has that? And so to go back to your question, like where is that alignment? The intention of a decentralized economy is, I would say, democratization of value transfers and a democratization of wealth. And I think most people would agree, we also want a democratization of intelligence and a democratization of backgrounds. And it actually matters. It's actually not enough to say, I'm an engineer and I know this about the technology. It actually matters to say, I'm a woman, I'm a trans woman, and this is my experience being a trans woman in this space, and this is why I think this technology matters and what we can do with it.
I really like that. I think it reminds me of another key thing that people talk about in this space, which is this Talib concept around like anti-fragility and having like resilience within the system, and the ability to say, hey, if it's just a bunch of like, rich white dudes in America that are thinking about this, that's like a central point of failure, essentially. And people try to make systems that are trustless or that don't have trust points of failure. I think this is a version of that, but for kind of like at the human level. So could you kind of talk a little bit more about what Maiden is trying to do in this space as a way to kind of solve this within the blockchain ecosystem?
Sure. I love the way you put that anti-fragility. Because really, yeah, if you're gonna invest in a diverse portfolio, why not invest in a diverse economy and a diverse society? And to invest in diversity in society means that you listen to the diverse experiences that are there. It means that you care about different perspectives and you recognize the value in those. So Maiden is say primarily an educational blockchain company. We're a for-profit company with a social mission, and that social mission is about educating and empowering people with cryptocurrency skills and blockchain skills, anything from cryptocurrency investment to smart contract development. Really exciting to see like what Kirk talked about, like this educational initiative, and blockchain is new enough, like 8-9 years old, that there's this huge gap in understanding. And so, Consensus is a leader in this space, and they're taking on the education challenge. And there's not a lot others that I know, so there's a real need for it. And what's unique about Maiden is that we're taking on that educational challenge, but we're doing so in a socially conscious way, which is to say that it actually matters who we train up, and it actually matters who we give access. Because if it's just an open platform, then the people with the most access and the most resources are the ones that rise to the top.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, and as you say, the opportunity, in one way it's kind of sad in space, it kind of compounds some of the existing power structures that exist. It's like you had a bunch of people in startups, in tech, in fintech, that were, rich white males or banks or what have you, but as you're saying here, that it's also kind of an opportunity, which is say, hey, we're this at the very beginning of this ecosystem, it's kind of nascent. This is the time to really double down on the diversity from a human perspective in order to really make that happen. So I like that. So tell me a little bit more. Something that I think about a lot in this space is like this space is a lot of kind of whether it's libertarianism or crypto anarchism or things of that variety, and in kind of a self-sovereign, like what should I do in this space? And so I'd like to just get your kind of initial take. I have this podcast, and on the podcast, not even on purpose, just kind of by accident, the first 6 people on the podcast, the first 6 interviewees, were all like white males. And I
It's
realized
not an accident.
it's not an accident. No, totally. So tell me, like, when someone like me, like, realize that when you look at an event, you're like, wow, there's a lot of people like me here, and you have that underlying decentralization desire, how should I kind of think about me personally doing good work in this space to kind of help this go forward?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The beauty of blockchain is that people have a vision and there's a shared vision of this space, and people are excited about creating an economy that's not so reliant on these central authorities. So people's hearts are there. You can feel it when you talk to them. And it's the nature of privilege and access to resources to not really be aware of the kind of struggles that women or people of color or trans or queer people have in the same kinds of spaces. So your question about how to help, one big thing is just naming it, like name what your identity is, be curious about other people's identities. Don't avoid the feeling of discomfort about bringing that up. There's a kind of myopic ideal that we shouldn't have to talk about identities and that we should just be talking about the content. But that's not the reality we live in. We live in a massively interconnected reality, interdependent, where our origination actually factors in to every aspect of our lives and what we have access to. So, Maiden is attempting to create opportunities for new culture, right? So that we can create meetups that are more inclusive. We can create events that speak to different perspectives, and so that people want to come back, right? A lot of the reason, like you say, how it's an accident, that, like, wow, everybody, all male or whatever that is, and there's so many factors that play into that, and so often you don't hear about it. So if you have an event and a woman shows up in that event and feels like she doesn't have a place there, or that she's not respected if she talks about her experience being a woman, she's going to go home and not going to come back, and you're not going to hear about it. So it's not your fault. I get the sense that people have really great intentions and hearts in the space, but the longer we don't talk about diversity and the incredible intelligence that is within diversity, if we want to unlock that intelligence, we need to name that and invite people in and ask people what's their experience. It's not offensive to honestly ask someone, what's it been like being a woman in blockchain? Or what's it been like being a person of color working in the tech space?
Yeah, I like that. I think just purely asking, it might be different person to person as well, saying, hey, being curious, what has it been like? Thank you, you're my master person from now on, okay? Sweet. So, acknowledging it and then being curious about what it has been like, and then I guess finally asking, how can I help? I guess that tri-pronged approach should be helpful. This is the goal. So talking that was from an individual level a little bit, and what can we as individuals do in the space. I guess another part of it is, how do you think about kind of the system level? And a lot of blockchain is kind of, we're talking about tokens and how you can kind of incentivize different kinds of behaviors within the space. How do you think at that system level and changing the operating system or humanity is a little big, but how do you think about that side of things, and what can we do at a system level to kind of create more diversity within the space?
Another small question.
Yeah,
thank you. You're right that blockchain is giving us a means to incentivize all sorts of behaviors. I love looking at blockchain through the perspective of incentive and through trust. And blockchain it's an economic tool that allows us to shift the incentives so they're more alignment with our human values, right? We forget that when we talk about technology. Like, we're doing all of this because there's some human value that we're wanting to amplify. And blockchain allows us to incentivize behaviors that are in alignment with that. And so it's a really interesting question. How can we incentivize diversity? How can we incentivize action? How can we incentivize organizing?
Like you say, there's a lot of people working on this, and some things are kind of first step necessary before you get to those later stages, and that's like, financial inclusion is a big thing within the space, and saying, hey, that's, it's a big goal of, Shapeshift, a big goal of Coinbase, to kind of, bank the unbanked and get them integrated into this ecosystem. And so I think there's that at a high level, and then later we can start to work also on this other version of diversity that exists.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is we don't have to wait. We can actually look at the space And instead of just having social impact, looking at like impact, it's almost like this one directional kind of focus. It takes the focus away from the subject and puts focus on the object. What are we helping? Who are we helping? And I think just as important, if not better question is who's doing the helping, who is in a leadership position, and who are we listening to when we're seeking advice and seeking expertise in this space?
I like that. Oh, thinking from the system level, the process level, how to do that. I guess to wrap up here, is there one final thing that you would say to people who are working in this space around things that we all can do to kind of make blockchain, like, because when I imagine an awesome future, I love to imagine it's like, blockchain is the place that all the other tech industries look at and say, wow, you're like killing it at diversity, you know? Is there one final thought on top of your mind for the things that we can do to kind of make that more of a reality?
Sure. I talked to a good friend of mine who's really passionate about blockchain, and I brought up the diversity thing with him. He was surprised, like, oh, I hope nobody ever feels left out, and it was so heartfelt. And I think the first step is to recognize that there is unequal access, and it's not due to malintentions, but it's due to a system that is set up with unequal resources. And so first step is acknowledge that, and the second step is start asking, like, recognize, communicate with the people around you, the people either in your company or in your personal connections that are talking about blockchain, and start to embody the normalcy of diversity. Start to say, like, hey, like, how can we get more women on this panel? That would seem like that would add a lot. So people recognize the value, and instead of it being like this side thing, start talking about it in your main conversation. And when we bring people together and when we seek the experts, start looking for diverse perspectives.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Raine.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Shapeshift.io, the world's leading trustless digital asset exchange. Quickly swap between dozens of cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ether, Dash, Bitcoin Cash, Augur, Golem, and many more. And this is not your typical crypto exchange. You don't need to create an account or share your personal information, and your funds are never stored on Shapeshift. This means that your hard-earned digital wealth is never up for grabs by hackers or other malicious actors. To get started, visit Shapeshift.io, choose the tokens you'd like to swap, input your receiving address, and send your funds. It's that easy.